Hello, Huntley Hotspurs. I'm back, as promised, with more details of the Mathys Tel deal. So, I've gathered this from multiple tier one top sources of journalists that are in the know and also affiliated with the club that know all the nitty gritties and are very close to the situation. This is where I get my information from. So, this all should be very accurate. So, how it's worked, right? So Mathys Tel, let's start from the beginning. Okay. Mathys Tel, back in when we sold Harry Kane, towards the end of the Harry Kane negotiations, Levy tried to be sneaky and try and bring Mathys Tel into the deal to bring Kane over as like a partial swap. To bring Tel over to Tottenham. So maybe even back then, Ange might have whispered a bit in his ear and said, listen, I think this guy's going to work well with me. But as it turned out, at that point, Tel had zero interest in joining Tottenham. He really had only just been basically at Bayern for a year, and he still thought he could break in significantly into the team, compete significantly in the team. At that point, Kane wasn't quite over the line yet. He wasn't quite there. Tel maybe thought, you know what, I may end up being the top striker at this club and the future of this club if this deal doesn't get done. So I'm not going to help facilitate this deal. So he didn't want to come. All right. And I think it was just too early to try and get him from Mathys Tel. I think it was quite tricky at that point. But I did think he would fit the system quite well. About a year ago, I made a video on how actually Mathys Tel is the perfect Ange ball striker because he has versatility. He's got speed. He's got some power. He's pretty good in the air. He's good at holding up the ball. He's good at pressing, good at getting past defenders. And Postecoglou loves versatility. And then Tel has played at Bayern as both a striker and a winger in almost equal measure. He can even play alongside another striker. More comfortable on the left wing in terms of playing out wide than on the right. But occasionally, from what I believe, he has been forced to play into the right. And he's done somewhat okay, but definitely his favorite positions are left winger and striker. And that's where he's played for Bayern 98% of the time. Where would I like to see him play for Spurs? I'd probably like to see him more in the striker role. But I have a sneaky suspicion that Ange may just favour putting him 60-40 in the left winger role as opposed to the striker. I think 60% of the time we'll probably play him as a left winger. 40% of the time he's probably going to play him as a striker. So I think it's good acquisition. I think he suits Ange ball. Ange really wanted him. So it's a good signing. So how did it all go down that he actually ended up at Spurs? So what happened is come January, around the middle of January, there was starting to be some murmurings that Mathys Tel was looking for a move elsewhere because he was starting to get a bit frustrated with the lack of game time he was getting under Vincent Kompany. Because he's actually only made 8 starts for Bayern in all competitions this season. And he's had a rather frustrating season with, scoring and the such because of that. When in comparison to the previous season with Thomas Tuchel, who ironically is a less attacking manager, Mathys Tel had a much better goal output as well as assist output, and he had a lot more playing time. Even with Kane there, Tuchel would occasionally still throw Tel in to start some games over Kane or play him alongside Kane. Now it's kind of like with Kompany, who's a more attacking manager, ironically, and very much like Ange. So he has decided, no, basically Kane's going to do everything. Thomas Muller, he trusts him more to be a backup striker to Kane, it seems, than Mathys Tel. He trusts Kingsley Coman more on the wings. Sane more on the wings than what he does Mathys Tel. And yeah, even in his final game, what proved to be his final game at Bayern, or at least I hope it was his final game for Bayern, he basically, I think as a nicety, Vincent Kompany put him in the starting lineup, but even then he only got the 45 minutes. He was taken off for the second half. So, and he even, waved goodbye and everything to the fans afterwards. So, yeah, I think Mathys Tel wanted a new challenge. And with all those mutterings coming on, from around the 20th of January or so, Chelsea were the one showing the most interest. Chelsea were saying, yeah, we want Mathys Tel. That lasted about a day or two, and then suddenly reports came out from Germany, from their top journalists, that Mathys Tel doesn't want to go to Chelsea. And that was music to my ears at the time, because it was one team out of the race. And the reason was apparently is that he wanted more game time, and he felt that at Chelsea, there's just too many options. And I agree with him on that matter. There are too many options at Chelsea. There's too many attackers, too many striker-winger hybrids, and too many wingers and strikers on their own. There's Pedro Neto there. There was João Felix there. He's not gone on loan to AC Milan, but he was still there at the time. There's Christopher Nkunku. There's, there's Nicholas Jackson. There's Cole Palmer. There's just too many. The chances of Mathys Tel breaking straight into Chelsea, or even getting confidently on the bench for most games, was not guaranteed. So I can understand that situation. Then it emerged that Tottenham and Man United were the two teams most interested. A few days later, around the 25th or so of January, it was then reported that Tottenham and Man United are the ones that are going to push the hardest this transfer window for Mathys Tel. It was then rumoured that Bayern preferred a more permanent move with an obligation to buy or a permanent transfer in order to get Mathys Tel out, because they weren't like fully committed. They weren't like desperate for him to go. But they were willing to let him go, because I think had communicated that he was maybe not so happy, and maybe company sensed he wasn't so happy with his body language or his attitude or whatever, with not getting to play enough, and always being the understudy to Kane, always. So what happened then is Tottenham put in the most work for Mathys Tel till around I'd say for about 3 days. We put in a lot of work, a lot of talks. And on the 30th of January, the evening of 30th of January, the news broke that Tottenham and Bayern, after a period of negotiations, had managed to reach an agreement for a permanent transfer of around 51 million pounds for Mathys Tel, to go permanently from Bayern to Tottenham. And apparently he was offered about a 4.5-year contract on that. It then was said that Tel needed more time. He wanted to maybe wait until closer to the end of the window to see if anything came in, or if he had multiple options, and then to weigh up his options. That was what was coming out. So we gave him about 24 hours, but we started getting antsy, and Daniel Levy actually flew all the way to Munich to have face-to-face discussions with Tel's agent and Tel himself. Apparently those discussions were really didn't go well. Levy came back empty-handed. If anything, Tel basically, I think, maybe got a bit annoyed by that, because within 24 hours then, and within mere hours after Levy arrived there, Tel rejected Spurs. He didn't. It wasn't on the table anymore where he said, maybe I'm weighing up my options or whatever. He just said, I'm not coming to Spurs. And that was shattering, I think. Because I thought he'd be a really good fit for us. And with Levy going there, a lot of the time when Levy does go to all the effort to fly somewhere and he's negotiating, and a club, there's been a club-to-club agreement, then most of the time you can get some sort of deal over the line. So I was actually mildly surprised that so quickly after Levy going there, Tel just immediately was like, no, I've rejected Spurs. And I think to me that points out annoyance. I think it was more a reaction of, why does it feel like I'm being forced? Give me time. You're not giving me time. I think that's maybe what the whole Levy situation was. But I can understand why we needed to try and push to get him, because we wanted to fend off the Premier League clubs like Man United and Arsenal. After he rejected us on Friday night, suddenly, for basically the whole of Saturday and Sunday, it was all about Man United and Arsenal making moves. Arsenal apparently considered him. They got into preliminary talks, but it never got any further than that. Man United were showing very concrete interest. They had concrete talks that were initially promising with Bayern, and particularly with Tel himself. He agreed to terms that he would want to come on a loan. Apparently, Man United wanted a straight loan, They weren't really offering options to buy, obligations to buy. Bayern then, apparently for some reason, and it's been highly rumored that it's the loan fee, Man United pulled out of the deal. They said, no, we're not willing to proceed. And it then later re-emerged that Bayern were asking for a 5 to 6 million just pure loan fee for Mathys Tel. And that was irrespective of whether there'd be any options or obligations to buy or whatever. They just wanted a straight up 5 to 6 million loan fee. And with the wage bill, they wanted the club to cover the full salary for Mathys Tel. And maybe with Man United's financial issues, they couldn't afford those two things. When you compile the 6 million plus having to pay all his wages, they probably just said, you know what, we actually then can't afford it. Sorry. But their loss was our gain, as it turned out, because then, seemingly after these talks broke down, maybe Mathys Tel got a bit bleak, a bit depressed. You know, he thought, oh, wow, am I really going to sit now on the bench at Bayern? Is this the situation I brought myself into? And then Ange, on Monday morning, from all reports I've read, called Mathys Tel. And Mathys Tel also confirmed that he spoke with the manager. And he said to him, listen, you know, I really want you. He told him more about how he would use him right now and why he needs him right now and why he thinks he could be good and why Ange wants him. That's what apparently the main content of the conversation was. More than maybe what Levy was discussing in terms of like, oh, you know, here's this amount of money you're coming for, you know, this is a project and, you know, we want like the top talents, blah, blah, blah. That's, I think, the angle Levy went at, a very business-like way. And talking a lot about the future and, you know, committing and, you know, the 6 year and the 4.5 year. He probably mentioned all those kind of words to Tel. But Ange just said, listen, come now. We need you now. This isn't about the future. This isn't about, you know, assigning a 6 year contract or even a 4.5 year contract. I want you now. And you're going to play. You're going to play. I promise you. And apparently that was a big thing for Tel, was just knowing that he's going to play. And he also said in his interview that he appreciates the commitment and he spoke with the manager, he spoke with Levy, he spoke even to Wilson Odobert at Spurs, who's a teammate of him in the France under-21 team. He spoke even with our good old secret agent Harry Kane there at Bayern, and all of them said to him, listen, come to Spurs. It's a good club. You can do really good things there. So then, as it turned out, on the Monday late afternoon, we got a transfer bomba from Fabrizio Romano saying, here we go, Mathys Tel to Tottenham. And I got really excited. I was like, oh my God, how has this happened? How did we get Mathys Tel? And then I read a bit further, and my initial excitement was slightly hampered when I read straight loan, no option to buy. Because I thought to myself, oh, okay, that's good. I'm glad we got him. But the no option to buy kind of concerned me a bit, because it kind of just showed that, you know, maybe the player didn't have faith in wanting there to be any, you know, outcome in where he stays. But then I heard that, and, you know, I didn't want to get too attached to him and then he just ends up having to leave anyway at the end of the season. Because there's not been an option to buy or whatever. And maybe, you know, you've got too many competition for your signature, too many clubs negotiating fees of Bayern. And I just thought, no, it's, you know, I don't want to get too excited then if it's no option to buy. But then I read that Spurs were pushing to get an option to buy in the deal. And that then really piqued my interest. I was like, ooh, if we can get that actually takes this deal to a much higher level if you actually even just add in something as simple as an option to buy. And as it turned out, very late, with about 2 or 3 hours of the transfer window to go, the news broke that Spurs did manage to include an option to buy in the Mathys Tel deal. Now, from what I've read, David Ornstein, who's a very reputable, reliable Tier 1 journalist, who's very in the now with regards to Premier League matters and particularly matters around London and the London clubs, he stated that Mathys Tel has agreed the terms on a 6 year contract that would be triggered if Spurs were to go with the option of buying him at the end of the season, and that he has signed the contract. The wording is a bit open there. And Is that in the fine print of the contract? Does it say that by having this option to buy clause that that there's also this agreement on the 6-year contract to join Spurs should they decide to exercise that buy option? And thereby, if Spurs say, okay, we'd like to activate it immediately in legal terms, Tel then begins on that 6-year contract because he's agreed the personal terms of it. And then there's also other reports from almost the top journalist, also a tier 1 journalist, Fabrizio Romano, who basically gives the final say on all of when the transfers have happened or what's not happening, what is happening. He gives the famous "here we goes" that makes us know what's actually happening. And he's kind of gone off some reports, I think, from other German tier 1 journalists who've stated that there is an option to buy in the contract. Mathys Tel has signed the contract, loan of option to buy, but that the details specifically of that buy clause is that Spurs can choose to activate it, which if he does do somewhat decently, I'm almost 100% certain with the amount of hype Ange and trust Ange has put in him. If Spurs continue with Ange and Mathys Tel's one well, I think it's almost guaranteed Spurs are going to want to exercise that buy option. Then actually still at that point, there would still need to be some sort of discussion between Tel and Tottenham. Does he accept them turning the loan into a permanent move with that option to buy? So I'm not sure if it's just a gentleman's agreement that, there is these personal terms and the terms have been agreed and Tel said, you know what, I agree, I will sign a 6-year contract if you put an option to buy. I don't know if that's just a verbal thing he's being given. I don't know if it's actually legally signed into the contract. I don't know if there is that need for the further discussion at the end of the season, should we choose the option to buy. But in any circumstance, the simple nature of the deal is that it's a loan. We paid a loan fee of 5 to 6 million. We're covering his whole salary from Bayern. He is guaranteed to stay here until June. And then in June, we do have an option to buy. We'll find out more in June if we choose to activate that buy option. We'll then find out exactly what that buy option entailed. If it goes through a relatively little drama, then we know, okay, probably it was in the actually legally signed contract. He probably was already in writing there that there's that 6-year deal, and Tel is fine with it. If we see there's a bit of dragging feet or there's a bit of discussion still happening or adjustments being made, then we know probably Tel did need to be a bit more active in the decision. But yeah, either way, if Tel scores goals, he'll be happy. If he's happy, he'll score goals. I think a lot of the teammates he's going to have are very friendly. He's got some familiar faces like Wilson Odobert. He's got some support from other good level attackers. He can break into the first team quite easily. He can get quite a few games starting. He will get, I think, all the games that he's fit, and hopefully that's all of them. He will be able to play off the bench at the very minimum for a pretty fair share of the game. He's definitely going to get more game time at Spurs than what he would have gotten at Bayern. That's for sure. Definitely. So I hope that with that buy option, the fact that Tel was willing to still come to Spurs and get and join and everything while we have that option to buy, and he signed the contract which includes the buy clause. I think that shows Tel would have made a bigger fuss about I just want a straight loan if that's my thinking. If he really saw absolutely no chance of future at Spurs, he would not have even agreed to putting an option to buy in there. The fact that also he has seemingly agreed the personal terms on a potential 6-year contract should Spurs activate the buy option shows that he does. There is a world in which he's saying, yes, I could be happy to stay here. These are the terms and you've offered them to me and I accept them. So yeah, I'm really hoping he hits the guy running, and I hope that buy option can be exercised if he does well with relatively little fuss and it can get done. Because I would be absolutely buzzing if he does well now for him to stay for 6 years. That would be one hell of a coup. I'm glad we have that option to buy. I think it makes the deal significantly better to have an option to buy in it. Significantly better. So yeah, that's the details of the Mathys Tel transfer. And apparently him and the new signing Kevin Danzo are fit to go for the Liverpool game tomorrow. Whether they'll start or be on the bench, I'm not sure. I'm pretty sure Danzo will start though, because Dragusin's out, Romera's not going to be playing tomorrow, Van der Ven's not going to be playing tomorrow, so expect Davies and Danzo to be the centre-back pairing tomorrow. And yeah, Tel, I think, is a bit more open. I think I have a feeling he's not going to start, but I do think he's definitely going to be on the bench, and I think he will get to play a fair portion of the game. So I'm excited for their debuts tomorrow. I hope both of them do make their debut for Tottenham tomorrow. As always, come on, you Spurs.